Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest today spent over 20 years working as a licensed mental health counselor. She's got a master's degree in psychology, and now today does a lot of work as a life coach, also working with people post-relationship trauma to help improve their relationships and a bunch more. And she's been very widely recognized for her work. So this is a new kind of door to open for the podcast, and I'm very excited to dig into all of it with her. But a couple quick announcements first. You guys have kind of heard my spiel on my story. If you haven't read about it yet, you can head over to my website, see what I'm talking about there, and also join my mailing list to get updates about any of the projects that I have going on behind the scenes that you guys have heard me talk about a little bit on here in previous introductions. But lastly, as always, if you've been listening for a while and you haven't supported the show with a rating or a review yet, please take a second to do that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. And if you prefer to watch your podcasts, you can now do that on YouTube. So head over there and check us out there. But with all of that out of the way, please welcome Miss Riana Milne.
Hey, hello everyone. Hey Zach, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh yeah, thanks for coming. I'm excited for a little love doctoring today, but just so that everyone has a complete picture of what you're doing today. I didn't want to misspeak on your behalf. Can you lay that out a little bit more, and maybe more so what your title is today? And then I have some questions that I want to ask you about the past working as a licensed mental health counselor before we kind of dive into the relationship stuff specifically.
Sure. So my path starts when I was a child at age 16. My very best friend was killed by a drunk driver, Michael. And I had a hard time processing that death and that loss. And I asked my mom if I could go to a counselor. And she said, no one in this family will ever go to counseling. And I said, then I will grow up and become one.
It's very healthy.
That's when I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I kind of started my mission there because if that loss taught me anything, I questioned how much time did we have. So I started reading the masters for my healing: Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, Dalai Lama, Marianne Williamson. I was studying the Course of Miracles and other spiritual readers. And I really loved how it changed my mindset on things. So I've been doing and teaching mindset work since my 20s. I did have a model and talent agency in school for over 10 years, and I helped small town people from Erie, PA, make it in the large markets in modeling, singing, acting, or dancing, whatever their career choice was in the arts. And love that. And I found that a big part of what was missing for success as I started to meet them was their mindset. So I did become later certified as a mindset coach. And like I said, I've been doing mindset work for over 40 years. And I raised a couple of daughters and was able to go back to get a triple master's in applied clinical and counseling psychology, and graduated in year 2000 and opened up my company, Therapy by the Sea. So we're going on year 26 right now. Along that journey, I always loved the model that was coaching. The difference is you're working with your client as a team. Together, you're processing, well, my method is you're processing the past troubles from childhood or love relationship issues, and also analyzing what goals and dreams do they have for their future. We have to heal the past before we can propel you into your future. So that's my job. I have courses for singles, couples, straight, LGBTQ clients. It doesn't matter. Childhood trauma has no prejudice. I did develop the childhood trauma checklist in year 2010 because my therapy career, I was working with very many diverse populations. I worked with women from the prison system, in a drug and alcohol rehab center. I worked in a teen rehab center. I worked with kids in a hospital, the mental health ward, ages 5 through 19. I worked in the schools as a trauma counselor from kindergarten all the way through college, so at every grade level. And then private practice, right? So many different diverse cultures, and I kept finding ages, race, it didn't matter, that the top 10 traumas kept coming up as impacting them in their current lives and what their dreams are for the future. So that's when I started really pinpointing what the work was that I wanted to do, was teaching about how childhood trauma impacts us in life, love, and business. And it was funny because in a triple master's, you would think I'd hear the word childhood trauma, but I didn't hear it once. So I just started talking about it in 2015 and getting on podcasts. I had written the books Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams. They went to #1 bestsellers. And then I wrote notebooks for my curriculum, which are 150 pages that I do with my coaching clients. So that's how I got started years down the road. And starting in like 2017, I went completely coaching only globally and really launched my brand and message in that year. And soon after, a lot of magazines wanted to, feature me in articles. And I think I have about 15 or 16, including like Forbes and New York Weekly, even Vogue Daily, Influencer. So there's a bunch of them anyway. And then
I'm gonna pause you here because there's like a million things here, and that's what I had referenced when I had said you'd been widely recognized, was like this stuff started getting picked up. But I was curious. I mean, it seems, I guess, the childhood trauma leading into, especially probably working with women in the prison system, I would guess you probably saw a lot of that stuff bleeding over. Not that it excuses missteps that people have had, but where you can see that there's probably a line drawn between things happening and obviously how that influences the trajectory of people's lives, which is, that's true in any case when you go through hard things, and especially when it's not dealt with, like you've said, where you, whether you stuff down or not, like at some point that it will come out if you're not addressing whatever these issues are, whether it's the loss of someone or, like, with you losing a friend to a drunk driver or other issues in your life. But it's, you mentioned these, I guess on one hand, the word trauma got thrown around a lot, and I hear it getting thrown around a lot outside of, to where I feel like it almost gets overused sometimes. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what are the trends that you've seen here, kind of that commonly come up and bleed over into relationships?
well, let's start with a checklist. I can name the top 10 traumas that I have found, and our listeners, they would like to, write them down or make a note of them in some way. That way they, can discuss them later. So the first one is any addiction in the family. So drugs, alcohol, sex, meaning you knew your parent was a cheater, porn use, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching, workaholism, social media addiction. There's 12 right there that if they're taking precedence over time with your child, it could be an issue. Number two is, what verbal messaging did you hear growing up? Did you hear positive things like, I'm proud of you, I love you, great job, kiddo? Or instead, did you hear, change that outfit, you look fat in that? Or why should I send you to college? I'm not wasting my money on you. These are negative put downs. Also, in verbal messaging, how did your parents work through an issue? Were they yelling and screaming each other? Then that became normalized in your household. Or did one parent shut down and the other one was angry and the one was just like avoidance? So we learn the norms of the family system. Number three is emotional neglect or abuse. Number four is around abandonment. And there's two types, fault and no fault. So a no fault abandonment would be if a parent happens to die early, if they were deployed for war and had to leave the family, or even supported the family with a job that took them out of the house a lot. Kids could be upset with that, but in their mind, they're doing what's right for the family. So it's no fault
So you
abandonment.
classify that as abandonment even if they're coming back?
Yes, because it's a long time away.
Uh, So how, I'm curious how that is a trauma. I'm from a military family. I was also in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
It's, my dad was gone a lot, but always came back. I guess at what point does that turn into a trauma? Because in my life, that definitely wasn't a trauma. He's just, he's
I have a very similar story, Zach, and my dad was military, colonel in the Air Force. We did not know he was also CIA and FBI until he passed on, and we got letters that he served under Carter and Ronald Reagan and with William Casey with the FBI and CIA. So as a little kid, I remember saying, "Well, where's Dad?" My mom was, "Oh, I don't know where he is." I said, "Well, when's he coming home?" "Well, I don't know." I'm like, "Well, is he okay?" Like, it's like this anxiousness. Where is the dad that I'm so close with? When is he coming home? It was always that question. So it's a lack of security. It's a form of no fault abandonment, right? So that's how he supported the family. And then there's fault abandonment, meaning you never met your child or you were with the child when the couple stayed together. If there was a divorce or a breakup, you left. And another one could be there's a parent in the house, but they're emotionally detached. They don't talk to you, they're not involved with you. They might come from work, eat dinner, go into a work office, and just really not attend your school functions, just kind of emotionally checked out. And that's a form of a fault abandonment. The next one is any physical abuse, rape, or molestation. And again, these could happen inside or outside of the home. So you could have the perfect family, but then you got bullied at school or a coach took advantage of you, something like that. Number 6, if you're a part of the foster care system, adoption can be traumatic, or you had to go live in another person's house other than with mom or dad. Even if it's grandma or an aunt, it's still you're displaced from your parents. Number 7 is personal trauma. That's if you felt different in any way. So, I worked in the schools, so my kids that were identified as ADHD, they felt different, needing to go to special classes. If there was a chubby child, they often got teased for that. I happened to be skinny and gawky. I was called a nerd, so I got bullied for that. If you're different of a different race or culture or coming out as a gay or lesbian teen, very often you could get bullied for that. So many people can identify with trauma 7. Trauma 8 is sibling trauma. If there was an issue with one of your siblings upon birth, then your mom and dad needed to spend more time with them because, they needed help. Or if your sibling bullied you, or the third example is if your sibling was the golden child, the favored one, the star athlete, more handsome, more beautiful, the better student, you could have felt a little bit slighted because they got more favoritism. Trauma 9 is around the family, and also trauma 11 that I had to come down and be mixed with that one. So trauma 11 was community trauma. Our examples of that is COVID, how it impacted everyone in communities around the world. It is also our floods, fires, hurricanes that wipe up communities at large, our school shootings or our mass shootings. And then that also impacts the family. Of course, if there's a trauma and that family happened to be a part of it, but also trauma in the family could be economic status, a lot of struggling. Your example, Zach, military families in the U.S., we travel, sometimes move every 2 to 4 years, making you the new kid at school. That can be stressful and hard on a child. Growing up in a dangerous neighborhood, if a parent was incarcerated, there's many different examples. Those are just a few. And then trauma 10 is any mental health issue in mom or dad, with the 2 most difficult for kids to navigate is bipolar, which is manic depressive. An example of that is like mom goes out for a shopping spree, spends $3,000. She loves everything she got. She's happy for a month. The bills come and she's depressed for 3 months because she can't meet the bills. And then the worst, I think, is the borderline personality disorder. This is an example of when they're good, they're great. When they're bad, they're horrid. And the child never knows what they're going to get. It's a very erratic type of mood disorder. And they will get angry at the littlest thing that nobody else would be upset about. So those are the top 10 traumas that I name.
well, and the unpredictability tends to then stem into personality disorders.
Anxiety, a
So,
lot of
yeah.
anxiety. Yeah. Most of my clients come to me, that's one of their ongoing traits, like this ongoing underlying anxiousness, bouts of depression sometimes. Yeah.
I a couple. I mean, I do this. This is how in these interviews when people say something and I have a disagreement, I push back for the sake of discussion. I'm not crapping on anything here. I'm curious. Like, do you? Obviously, I already mentioned kind of the I guess questions that I had around the abandonment stuff, but then the so on 7 and 8, I can't. One of them was basically the sibling trauma, and I think I don't remember exactly what 8 was. But I think that's when you use the example of moving around a lot was in 8. But so some of that stuff almost feels like it's to me, and I'm curious, do you view these on these all of them on the same level? Because from the okay, because like moving around a lot again was not traumatic. I view that as something that like shaped me to be flexible. Or I have a sister with Down syndrome who did require a lot of care, and that's she enhanced our lives when she came around and really shaped my views today. So I was just okay,
Nice. Yeah.
yeah.
So no, it's on a 1 to 10 scale. For an example, when someone mentions physical trauma or being hit, like with a switch or a spoon or electrical cord, and I'll say, "Well, how traumatic was that for you on a 1 to 10 scale?" And they might say, "Well, it happened twice. It was scary." I'd say it was a 3 or a 4. And then there's the kid that came home every day to an alcoholic father who knew he was going to be beat every day. That's a 10. And it's in the interpretation of the individual, right? Some people don't think of it as a big deal. Some people normalize it. I had one African American woman, and I said, "Any physical abuse, rape, or molestation?" She said no. We go further into her discovery session. She goes, "Yeah, it wasn't much fun when my dad hit me with a switch," which is a tree branch that you pull off the tree to be hit with.
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh, you didn't mention that you have physical abuse." She goes, "Oh, well, everyone in my block got hit that way. That was just normal." So that's a normalization of a behavior that when I worked in a school, if I was told by a student that they were being hit that way, I'd have to report it to Division of Youth and Family Service. It's physical abuse.
Mm.
So, everyone has their interpretation of what is normal or they normalize it. And part of the normalization is so that the child's mind can deal with it. Like, "Oh, my mom and dad love me. This is just normal," kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the child's mind, and as an adult looking back, how did they feel about it? So we have to
Yeah.
process it pretty deeply.
Yeah. And do you feel it is interesting because you do hear some people who have had horrendous childhoods talk about it like very nonchalantly. And I don't know, sometimes it seems like those are, people who have become well adjusted. Sometimes it also seems like maybe it's a defensive thing that people are doing to minimize it and not have to recognize it. And then, everything in between on that spectrum. But is there a trend that you notice in how people, because you mentioned that it's how they look back on it as an adult. Do you notice some some sort of key factors that contribute maybe to someone who has actually processed those things even before they come to you, at least on some level, in terms of like a clear kind of separation point between someone who's heavily affected by whatever's happened to them and someone who's not, given that these are assuming that these people have had somewhat similar kind of experiences. You've been doing this for a long time, so I would imagine you've had some similar cases.
Yeah. Well, when they come to me, they're usually at their wits' end. Uh, Very often, childhood trauma leads to love trauma. So the first marriage could have been abusive. Let's say a woman that was abused in her marriage. She finally divorces. The kids are old enough. She finally gets out of this 22-year marriage, reads a couple self-help books, how to date, goes out and dates, gets another abusive boyfriend, says, "That's not going to happen to me again," reads more, goes out, third guy, abusive guy. That's when I usually get them. What am I doing wrong? What's the matter with me? And the problem is the original childhood traumas have not been healed. So let me go into a few examples of how childhood trauma can show up in love relationships so that our audience is a little bit clear on that. For example, if you're dating someone who is controlling and jealous, they usually had traumas 2 and 7, which was verbal abuse, and 7 being put down and not feeling good enough in some way, with their peers or within their family. That's jealousy and control because they don't feel subconsciously that they deserve you and they're jealous someone's going to take you from them. Perfectionism behavior or people pleasing. This is very often a woman. I'll give you a case example here. She showed up with her husband. She goes, I do everything for him, cook, clean, the clothes, the kids. He never does anything, and I never hear thank you. He goes, well, I don't ask you to do those things. And she goes, well, that's how I show I love you. She goes, but you're so angry all the time that you do them that I don't feel you love me. So this is a, case, and she had a difficult alcoholic father. So if she pleased him to death, she would not get yelled at. So she was over cleaning the house, taking care of her siblings, and did all the work. And occasionally, she'd have that thank you from the angry dad, and there was peace in her house as long as she could control it with massive cleaning and organization. So her boundaries were so stretched, and her way of like giving love was what she thought love was. That's how she didn't get it back from her husband. So, we have to once they understand what the childhood traumas are and how they're being triggered, now we can change it. But you can't change what you don't know or understand. So that's people pleasing. A lot of women get into that. And some men have perfectionism. It's kind of the same thing. Difficult mom, just, if I please her and everything is perfect, I won't get yelled at or punished. With abandonment issues, you could be clingy, have anxiety if your partner is gone, or talking to an opposite person of another sex. That you're jealous or just anxious that they're not with you. Anger and yelling, of course, if that was normalized in your house, you can tend to yell at your partner thinking, well, this is how people talk.
Mhm.
I have an example of that. I had a couple in my office in Delray Beach, Florida, and she was from Philly, where I'm from, and we can talk really fast there. And she was from an Italian family of South Philadelphia, where I had many, many friends, and they tend to yell because they're full of passion, right? So
I like Italians.
yeah, I totally. Well, he was a nice, calm Midwestern guy from a farm. And his complaint was, my wife yells at me all the time. And her response is, I don't yell at you. What are you talking about? So she doesn't hear it. It was so vocalized. So I had to work with the communication skills to calm her down, slow her down, watch her tone, watch her volume, and have him totally understand that she was not punishing him like his angry mom did. So, it's going back into each of the childhood traumas. When I have a couple, I have to do the trauma work for partner A, partner B, and the third entity is the relationship. So each has to understand each other's traumas and then how they're triggering it in the relationship. And then we have to change all that.
Does the does abandonment is that the abandonment as a child, is that where a lot of the less healthy attachment styles kind of come from
Yes. Very
typically?
much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Could be an overwhelmed mom with a lot of kids. Could be a working single mom that has to work to support her children, and her kids have to let themselves. I used to call it my day latchkey kids, that they let themselves home from school and had to wait 2 hours till mom could get home. And back then, there wasn't really cell phones, or video cameras that you could know that your child was home okay. But it lists that in the research as a form of abandonment. It's like, well, what are we supposed to do? We got to work to get food on the table. So it's not like parents are doing this on purpose, right? All parents do the best that they know how. But it is proven that childhood trauma goes through at least 3 generations. So if you experienced it, so did your parents, and so did their parents.
And odds are that each generation that is continuing for three generations, that's where the perpetuation kind of comes from.
Yes, yes, unless one of the partners or parents does active work to get rid of it, learn about it, and then teaches and works with their children in a different way. So every mom or dad I have here, I always ask, how are your children? Because if they went through a toxic relationship, they already have childhood trauma, the child. Are they mad at mom or dad? Are they angry? Are they using drugs or alcohol? Are they depressed and in their room all the time? For kids, there's two types, internalizers and externalizers. The externalizers, the angry kid might run away, hang out with risky kids. The internalizer's quiet, hangs in their room, doesn't have many friends, is on video games the whole time, seething with anger. So neither is healthy. But any of our parents listening, if you're concerned about your children, don't think this is a stage and they'll just get through it. You really want to get them with a good coach that understands childhood trauma and that they can work with them. Um, yeah, working with so many teens. Like I said, I saw them in the mental health unit from ages 5 through 19 at the hospital. By then, it was pretty severe. So, cutting, self-mutilation, you got to see these signs and really take care of it. Don't wait.
I'm curious, like even there, you used coach specifically, even coming from a licensed mental health counselor background. Was that intentional? And if so, why? Other than the fact, obviously, you have a business as a coach now. So I'm
Well, I've had it since 2009. I took my coaching certification for singles 1 year and couples for a year two. So I have 2 years of coaching certifications. I love the coaching model because it's educational. We are teaching real skills. And I created from my research a notebook of 150 pages. For young people, it's a little bit lighter. I work online only with ages 16 up. My oldest client was 83. Um,
wow.
but we do the workbooks together. They fill out the forms, they give it to me. From what they answer, I know I have to teach them back. So it's always educational every time I see them. Where therapy is you're processing your feelings. And you'll see the stereotypical therapist say, so how do you feel about that? I never asked that question because to me, when I was in getting my LMHC, licensed mental health counseling, and one of my teachers made the assignment, I want you to go to 5 counselors and tell me which one you like the best and why. And I said, I don't like any of them. Nobody gave me any advice. I'm just sitting there. They want me to talk. I'm like, well, what do you want me to talk about? Do you have questions to ask me? you know, so I was very frustrated with that model. I didn't like that model at all. So the coaching model to me was where I felt my comfort zone and I love to teach. And I teach research-based education and skills. And they love it too because they start feeling better right away. I mean, one of my testimonials from one of my people that did my 2 hour life and love transformation session, where I go through what are your childhood traumas? This is why you're attracting a narcissist. This is what we're going to do with it. And there's a blueprint afterwards. She goes, I learned more in this 2 hour session than I did in 7 years of therapy. I can't believe it. None of this ever came up. So, it's a very active, proactive model, helping people to get into the future life that they really desire and have the love that they deserve.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I've tended to stay away from having coaches on here typically because I view it. I think a lot of it's more so it's not an issue with the idea in general. It is the fact that I think like with many things, there's a lot of grifters. And with you, I don't. That's why, I saw you have credentials that
At the
prove,
wazoo.
yeah, and that they're legit credentials, not, I recently had someone reach out who wanted to come on who was supposedly our relationship therapist and had all these credentials and things. And every time I looked one of them up, none of it was accredited. I don't even think she had a graduate degree in any
Wow.
form of mental health stuff. And some, you using the or her when I say you, I was talking about her, using the word therapist is seems to be intentionally misleading to me. That all these certifications were from like none of them were accredited or anything, and so it puts a bad taste in my mouth. I don't know if that's because I get that's a lot of the people that I get reaching out to come on here. So I was excited to pick your brain on specifically I get the dichotomy there and the differences between the two modalities and what drew you in. And I
A few more things, Zach, too. Like when you're a therapist, most people will call their clients a patient. That connotates to me that they're sick. Patient in a hospital, you're sick. To me, I still call my therapy people clients because they're just going through something. That's very much a coach's mentality. Let's deal with what's going on and let's make you feel better. So you need a diagnostic code for the insurance companies. Then your file is open to be given to everybody else in the insurance system or the healthcare system. With coaching, is private. So I have celebrities, I have police officers, I have EMTs, firefighters, air traffic controllers. They don't want a file floating around. They could lose, you're part of the military. If you have a mental health status, very often you can't go back and serve or you can't be part of it. So, coaching is private. So there's a lot of advantages to the coaching model
yeah, I get
for years. Yeah.
yeah, and because I've also known clinicians, if you're licensed in Arizona, you can't do any telemedicine outside of Arizona legally. So I was curious how much of it was, that versus I think you already spoke to why this format resonated with you more. It was just, I like to know how things work and why people make the decisions that they do. And so it was just, it's intriguing, but I know.
Be able to do trauma work with people around the world. I have people English speaking. I fortunately don't speak any other languages, but English speaking people all over the world can come for coaching. So I love that. And with my licensed mental health counselor, I'm in Florida. I can only see Florida people, which is sad, but there's all these rules, regulations, blah, blah, blah. And the therapy model, coaching, you have more freedom to help more people. So it is a definite plus.
And I think that's where some of my doubts around the, you know, a whatever the portion or whatever the proportion of the people is in that space, because there is a lack of regulation. I guess I go into it more hesitantly, which I think is healthy skepticism to an extent, as long as you're being mindful of it. But
Well, it's one thing just to call yourself a coach, and there's another thing to be certified. I have hired 14 coaches to grow my business and go global and learn all the systems I need to learn. I love the coaching model because it's educational. It gives me what I need. Um, and they are all top certified coaches, as I am. I'm certified with Relationship Coaching Institute, and also the mindset certification was from certification school. I'm CCTP, Advanced Certified Clinical Trauma Professional. So, yeah, I mean, I can learn the mental health part of it like CCTP too, but bring it into coaching so I can teach people the skills they need to know to feel better and heal. So I would call it the more educational model. That's the easiest way for me to describe my system, and that we work as a team.
yeah, to me, it seems like that is more of an exception as opposed to, that that format is more of an exception as a,
Probably because I like to be different.
yeah, yeah. Have you noticed that? I mean, I guess you may not really even interact with the coaches outside of your business, but if you have, is that something that you've noticed?
I don't know anybody else's relationship curriculum and how they work with it.
Mm.
Um, I always say I may be internationally known, but I small town in my delivery. Like anyone can email me and I'll answer them back. I don't have 4 or 5 assistants answering my emails, or can pick up the phone and call me and I answer. You know what I mean? So still very small town service. A lot of the other coaches, they want to put themselves up on this high pedestal and nobody can reach them, or you got to go through 5 assistants. Well, No, that's not the way I like to do business. I like
That's
my clients.
people in general. People in power do that. I've seen that with this freaking podcast a lot, where it's just it's weird the separation or the boxes that people will place themselves into as a, I don't know if it's a self-aggrandizing thing or what, but it's interesting. It's been a dynamic that I'd never really interacted with until starting this thing. But
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, so no, it's just the way I choose to do business. I'm not looking for 200 clients. I do VIP one-on-one or very small groups of like 12 people or less
Mm.
because I want everyone to get their transformation. It's not about the numbers to me. So everyone that's coming into me, they know I care, they know I'm concerned. And yes, the mental health background definitely helps because a lot of people have gone through severe trauma and are still going through it when they come to talk to me. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, because I have that experience, and nobody should be doing trauma recovery work who is not certified as a mental health counselor, because you can't even get a CCTP unless you are a licensed mental health counselor. So it is a mental health area and it is to be taken seriously. So just because someone went, I went through trauma, so now I'll be a trauma coach. Like, no, that doesn't work. That's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
They have to be careful who you're selecting.
yeah, and that's why I think this was a valuable thing to talk about, and I wanted to talk about it specifically for this reason. So if people hear it and realize that you need to do some self vetting. I mean, that's the case anytime that you're seeking out services through someone. But I know you also want to keep this on a shorter timeline than I typically do. So I want to jump into some of I guess the questions that I had about more specific points of friction in relationships that, I've experienced in my own relationships, and then also maybe what you've seen because it's things that I hear about. So I think number one here would be communication being the kind of the root of all evils. It seems like is a very, or the lack, specifically the lack of communication being uh, a huge fracture
Yes.
point for relationships. I mean, is because I went through a divorce several years ago. It was infidelity, and then I
Oh,
read the love languages book, and I learned about the five love languages, and like realized our communication was terrible, and then started it's changed how I've thought about how I communicate with people that I get close to, whether that's romantic or not, or just close friends, and how much of these issues typically boil down to just not like even the Midwestern man not understanding that his East Coast wife, when yes, she is audibly yelling, she's not intending to yell at him from like an emotional perspective.
how often is that? Oh yeah, all couples need communication work.
Okay.
Yes. My first degree is from Penn State in speech communication. So I have, I wouldn't say a huge list, but a 2-page list that I teach all my clients, singles and couples, how to properly communicate and how to communicate through a difficult issue. Because unfortunately, we did not learn that in our schools. We did not really have it normally modeled to us when we were growing up. Like I said, most people saw two types of styles when there was an issue. Yelling, screaming is style one, or shutting down, not talking about it, and thick air of resentment for several days. That's style two, which we can call passive aggressive. And then they don't know how to communicate themselves because they were never taught. So we do that lesson very early on. And they barely say anything during that lesson. I am just teaching. When this happens, you need to do this. So they start learning and practicing the new communication styles and skills early on. And it takes a while to break the bad habits and try to do something new when it comes to communication because people don't think, they just do it off the cuff. It's very unconscious. So we teach conscious and empowered communication, meaning, and I hate the word vulnerable. I got to be vulnerable to share my feelings. No, not really. You got to be empowered to share your feelings.
And willing
Because
to be uncomfortable for a temporary period while you do it because it is usually uncomfortable. Yeah.
But you're empowered to say how you feel. Well, hon, this, and you can use pet words like hon or babe. This is how I feel. How are you feeling about that? You try to come up with a win-win and negotiate through that. And if you say, well, we both don't do agree, it's like, okay, we're going to choose to disagree on this one because you're two different people. Nobody has to force the other to agree with their point of view, like politician A or politician B. Each person's entitled to their own feelings. And if it's a sore spot, just don't discuss it with your partner. Discuss it with your best buddy who's of the same political persuasion as you are. You know?
Actually,
Yeah.
that was one of the things I wanted to ask you is like how often is politics is that a common
Breaking
like
point.
another breaking point for people where like which and I it's hard to imagine that you'd get actually no it's not. I was about to say it's hard to imagine that you would get to even the point of marriage and being on such opposing sides, but people change over time. And also there's that thing you do when you're smitten with someone early on in a relationship where you're like, I'll look past that, that it's not something that you can look past later on. But
Or the lies that happen in politicians. Well, I think this person will do the next job, nice job. They get in and they don't. Well, I mean, honestly, what can we as one person do to change all that?
yeah,
So you just pick and choose when to discuss it. It was this big thing during COVID too, to vax or not to vaccine. A lot of people were fighting over that. My response is each person isn't responsible for their own body. Let them choose individually, you know? So those were, yeah, politicians and the vax or not vax controversies were big around couples. Sure.
pairing that with you're stuck inside together for a year with lockdowns. But um, all right, next one here. I'm curious. I think you mentioned it earlier, maybe when you were going through your checklist, porn. How often, what does that look like showing up in a relationship? Because I hear people talking about porn addiction. It's being addicted to it. And at what point is that an addiction? At what point does it start to bleed over?
It's a bad addiction, Zach, and most women feel very disrespected if their male partner is watching porn. There's a great author on this topic, Patrick Carnes. His book is called Out of the Shadows, and he speaks of porn addiction being worse than cocaine addiction on the brain. It is highly, highly addictive, and it disnormalizes what a normal, loving couple will experience with sexual intimacy. They always need the higher, more stimulating stuff going on to be excited. For the women that are a part of a porn relationship and are struggling, his wife, Stephanie Carnes, wrote Mending a Shattered Heart. So I would recommend both of those books to anyone that is involved in a porn addiction. Definitely, I have worked with men like this. They lost their families, their children, their jobs because they were masturbating instead of doing their work and not clocking in because they were addicted to doing it 8 times, 9 times a day. It is bad. It's really, really bad. So, yeah, anyone struggling with that, I would say go get yourself help. There is SA groups, sexual anonymous groups, and you should be a part of that as well.
Find a blind husband because he can't watch porn. Uh,
That works.
yeah, no, it's just, it's, it's weird because it's like it's the dopamine button. And I think I've heard other people talk about it where it is this dynamic of, yes, there's the progression of it because you're getting a fix like you would with another drug, but you're also not having, sex is something traditionally that you have to put a lot of effort in to achieve or to get, to find someone who is into you enough to where you enjoy each other enough that you will have sex. Whereas now you're getting that fix because your brain doesn't know the difference without any of the effort on top of everything else. And it seems to be, form that runaway relationship to it, like you've touched on, which is kind of crazy, and that leads me into the next one. You know, I had a sexologist on here recently named Hollywood. She's a psychologist, and she, you know, I guess with you, I'm more curious about how prevalent AI has been an issue. But on that same line, you know, we had kind of talked about some of these similar things, but also, you know, she mentioned a client that she'd had that literally had a full blown like sex doll hidden in his house from his wife for one of her clients that came in. And it is, you know, AI, a relationship with an AI girlfriend or whatever
Yeah.
flavors of these wrappers that are around these large language model services out there. Are you starting to see that become a prevalent issue as well?
I know it's out there and it's starting to jump. Have I had a couple or single coming in with that issue to me yet? No. Do I see it as dangerous? Very much so. Like any stimulation, let's go back to the childhood trauma piece. Why does somebody need a fake person on AI saying, "Oh my God, you're so hot, you're so handsome, you're so," because they feel less than. Goes back to their original way of how they feel about themselves as a man. So you have to go back to the early stage. Men that were sexually active very early in life, they tend to struggle with that, needing constant sexual intimacy. Why? It's like any drug. If you use alcohol early, cocaine, pot, you're more prone to addiction. But if you have sex early in life, you're more prone to sexual addiction. Same thing. Center of
Because
the
those
brain.
pathways have been established while your brain is still forming.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I've never heard that before, but it to make sense when you word it like that. Yeah, it is. It's any other addiction, and again, it's the same neurotransmitters that
Yeah.
are bombarding your still forming synapses. But
Serotonin, dopamine running around in your brain early on.
yeah,
Like, I want more. I want more of that. Yeah. So,
it's it's just it's so mesmerizing when you start talking about this stuff because it is how capable humans are and how incredible it is like that we are able to make it to adulthood without malfunctioning too much. But you get all these little things that can be hijacked by all the technologies that we've made or other things that have, you know, arisen out of civilization. And it's just we are so fragile. It's
for real.
it's wild.
And this is where mindset comes in. Any addictions or toxic behavioral patterns, dysfunctional things that aren't serving you. This is what I have to have them stop the unconscious just doing it and become very consciously aware about if they do it, what kind of damage they're causing themselves, their partners, their families. It's like working in a rehab, a drug and alcohol. It's like you keep drinking, look at what you're doing to yourself, your body, your partner, your children. Same thing. So, it's a lot of mindset work we have to do to get them to want to invest in a future that looks very different, healthy, emotionally healthy, more consciously aware, more spiritual,
Yeah.
more loving, more kind, more integrity, doing the right things when nobody's looking. So it's a lot of changing those original childhood experiences.
Yeah, I got on and I'm checking the time here because I want to be mindful of what we had talked about before we say it. So
Yeah, we're
I'll
about
go.
420. Yeah.
Um, so, you know, on the flip side of that, I was also curious, and not on the flip side of dealing with the emotional things, but more so on the flip side of the promiscuousness of maybe that arises out of early sexual activity or even just, you know, you starting to use that as a coping mechanism because again, it's a drug and people do start to lean into that instead of alcohol in some cases or whatever the other fix may be. Do you also see these childhood traumas? Have you seen them present? You know, are you aware of the term incel and that I get that's more of a it's a pejorative now, you know, but it stands for involuntary celibate. It is someone who cannot find a partner, and it seems to start to, in some cases, radicalize people. But do you see those childhood traumas contributing to people not being able to find partners that are coming in to see you too?
I think people who are choosing to be celibate, do it for various reasons, and some are perfectly okay. I mean, there was a period of time where it's like, I can't have a partner. I don't want a partner. I'm growing a business globally. This is going to take me 14, 16-hour days every day for a year or two. So I consciously chose. There are people that consciously choose for religious reasons. I'm not going to choose to sleep with someone until we're engaged or married. That's perfectly great. Actually, that's pretty respectable of themselves and their bodies. So there's times in people's lives where they don't feel that they want to have that partner. If they, I get more concerned about the people sleeping around to get love. They have sex on the first, second, third date, thinking, well, if I have sex with them, they'll love me. And then they feel used and thrown away when they ghost them. And I'm like, well, why are you intimate so early? Those are the ones I worry about. They're using sex to get love, and that never works. That's never working for a quality relationship. So choosing to be celibate for a period of time is, easy.
Yeah. But I was talking about involuntary. There are like, is this the first time that you've heard of the term incel? And that,
Yeah, I don't know.
okay. It seems to, the at least the general theme of it is that it's men, but it is involuntary celibacy where they can't find a partner. And so that's where I was curious if that's something that
Men
you've
that have
seen.
not been able to find a partner often come to me and say, I want to find somebody that's emotionally healthy. Or they don't want a partner. They're building their careers. They want to earn enough money to have a family before they think about that. So usually I find it to be self-selective, which is fine. There was so much emphasis on the sex, 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 free sex, this sex, it's like, maybe it was so overkill, people are tired of it. I think most people really want a sexual relationship with love, quality, happy, loving relationship. I think that's what most people desire. Not all, but I just get upset when somebody's being hurt by their own behaviors of, being sexual so early and then being rejected or ghosted. But they do that to get love, usually from abandonment issues in their past.
Yeah. And it's, culturally, it is almost like the intimacy in general, which I know generalities are dangerous, but with the more casual dating and specifically hookup culture seems to kind of propagate that a little bit, which is
Yeah.
un unfortunate. I think also the pain of that and putting yourself out there is probably unfortunately another thing that now, as a byproduct of that, people sometimes have to experience that, touching the hot stove effect with it, where you're like, okay, I didn't want the quick fix there. I need something deeper. And that's when you start to realize, like, you know what, that devalued myself, letting, giving myself up that early, like you talked about, in experimenting or trying to create intimacy where there is none, and it is just more primal. But
Yeah.
I think, God,
Yeah, it's everybody needs to do what they feel is right for them. I'm not here to preach one way or another, but I know when people come to me who have been hurt by a more promiscuous lifestyle, we have to change that up.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it is, it's trying to soothe through some means other than, again, facing whatever the underlying cause is.
Usually, yes. Yes.
Yeah. And lastly, here as we start to wrap up, there's, I think we, or at least myself, when you see a couple who's been married for 55 years or something crazy, and they're like, yeah, we fell in love at 18 and never looked back, and we're still happy today. I'm I guess on one hand, the chance that they've made it that far probably means they've developed the communication skills to where they don't need to come in and see you. But if you have had experience with those much longer, like those incredibly, those lifelong relationships into later life, do you notice a big difference in I guess on one hand, what brings them in, and then also if you touched on it earlier, the idea of resentment, like where things start to kind of fester and turn into that. Do you
Yeah.
notice different dynamics at play there with
Usually with the couples in the long-term marriages, they come in once there's been an affair. That's usually the norm. Um, One might want a divorce, one doesn't. They have children they're worried about, and they might have tried therapy before, and now they want skills to put it back together. Um, yeah, that's usually what I find. When you think about the generations, right? I mean, when I was growing up, divorce was never talked about. It was like shameful. Parents stayed together even though they weren't happy. It might have been affairs, but the women often just ignored them because no matter what, we got to stay married kind of thing. And then the 70s came and the new generations. I was part of the baby boomer, so we were expected to do everything as women: go to college, support our families, have sex, do the grocery shopping, the laundry, blah, 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 everything. And then that was so overwhelming. We're like, screw this, this isn't happiness, you know? So and then I'm seeing my daughters who are in their 40s have amazing husbands that do a lot around the home, did change the diapers for the kids where mine did not, or feed the child. It's like we had to do all of those things, but the men are very active fathers. I'm seeing the millennial men be wonderful fathers. So it's nice to see that transition over time where they're working more as a team. Because I know I had two daughters, but these young men saw their moms, the 70 moms, like doing all this, and the dads were shut out. They weren't barely involved with their kids, many of them. So, it's a generational thing. And I just hope, the newer generations are going more for emotionally healthy love. But I'm hearing marriages are way down. The desire to even have kids is way down in the late 20s and 30 somethings today. They're just like, well, let's have sex if it's easy, but I don't want complications. So,
and it seems to be another I'd imagine it'll start to swing back in the other direction at some point because that seems to have been, or at least it coincides with people becoming more focused on their careers and getting more into like this hyper corporate culture that we seem to uniquely have, specifically in America, like out more so than in any other place that I've seen so far. And I've done a decent amount of traveling, but it's just, now we're starting to see that and expect population decline everywhere. And yeah, so it will have to self-correct. But as I think my last kind of question here, and it came up as you mentioned that a lot of times those more mature relationships when they're coming in are after infidelity has occurred. Is there a common trend that typically sets the stage for those step outs to happen? Again, I know it doesn't justify what it doesn't justify the cheating, but if it does happen, do you see a trend there?
usually there's a lot of anger and resentment building up. Um, you know, uh, I always hear my women say, but I've told him over and over and over again, don't put me down. It's not funny. Don't yell at me. Don't make me feel insignificant in front of our kids. So if you are trying to work through, I mean, the early stages are the stages to come to get coaching, right? It's not waiting until the affair happens because there's always what happens before the affair that makes it happen. So people are either ignoring it, pushing it under the rug, saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they go back to the same damaging behaviors. Go early. Don't go too late. It's much harder to put it back together after the affair than helping you before it. So if you're seeing the red flags, and there's a free red flag checklist on my website under
Is
quiz,
there?
check it out. And if you're seeing some red flags, give me a call because we take care of those things. Yeah.
That's so funny. And that was a brilliant idea for you to come up with and put out there. That's great. I think that's a lovely way, I think, to wrap this up. Yeah. Go get your red flag spotter. Where can people find you and reach out and get their red flag checklist and everything else?
And the childhood trauma checklist, Zach. If they didn't get to do it on the show, they can get a free one under quizzes. My website is my name. It's rianamilne.com. And also, you'll get free book chapter downloads on there. My podcast is called Lessons in Life and Love with Coach Riana Milne. I have 126 shows out there. My YouTube channel, I think I have 350 audios and videos. So I have a lot of there that's free for y'all to start studying. And right now there's a free ebook given away on my website called The Mindset for Success, which is really important in today's world, which tends to be overly stressed out right now. So that would be a good one for you to get. And yeah, so everything's at the website. That's the best place to start, rianamilne.com.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing the knowledge and taking the time to come on.
Thanks for having me, Zach. It's been fun.
Yeah. And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. Remember, if you've been listening for a while and you haven't already, support the show, leave a rating and a review wherever you listened, and go check us out on YouTube so you can see my ugly mug talking to people every week. And
The very good guy to see you listen.
thank you.
He's handsome.
And share this around with a curious mind who needs to hear it. Again, there's so many golden nuggets in here and just a lot of food for thought. So I'll see you next time.